So someone suggested I make a video on the state of tech hiring, like Silicon Valley tech. I was initially kind of dismissive of the idea and didn't really want to make a video complaining about H-1B visas and stuff like that without really having anything helpful to contribute. But after learning about a new project that I will get to later in the video, as well as the mechanics of just how messed up this program is, not just for tech graduates, but also for the people getting hired, I've changed my mind. I think as played out as this topic is, there are in fact some aspects of them that I think I can shine a flashlight on. So the tech industry accounts for 90 to 95% of all H-1B visas issued. These are visas that allow companies in the US to employ a foreign national in a skilled position for up to 3 years, extendable up to 6. Now, there are claims of a shortage of tech employees here in the US, but I find them to be dubious at best when you start looking at the numbers of graduates. So, according to the ISFPP, in 2023, US colleges graduated 134,153 US citizens and permanent residents with degrees in computer science. That same year, 110,000 visas were issued to international compsci degree holders. Now, the problem here is that math doesn't line up with the fact that according to data from the NYC Federal Reserve Bank, 22.6% of recent compsci graduates were under or unemployed. Nearly a full quarter of people here who graduate with a degree in computer science are unable to do anything with it. That's pretty grim. Last year alone, Amazon brought in 9,200 people on H-1B visas, Microsoft 4,700, Meta 4,800, Apple 3,800, Google 5,800, Tesla 1,700. Between just those 6 companies, they issued more new H-1B visas in 1 year than we have recent compsci graduates who are unable to find work. So what's going on? Well, basically, when a company wants to do this, it's a 2-step process. In order to abide by labor and employment laws, any job opening needs to be publicly listed. So to get around this, they generally go for a dual-pronged approach. There's the public listing, which is done in as confusing and opaque and as intentionally obscured of a way as possible. Listed on the website in 1-point black font on a black background, or, advertised in a vague call for more info, classified ad in a local newsletter with a circulation of 600 people. Then, the actual recruitment is done via alumni networks for foreign universities, with the most notable by far being the Indian Institutes of Technology. And because of various causes that we will get into shortly, including cost of living differences, power imbalances, exploitation, and just plain old racism, you now have an applicant pool that you can pay significantly less to do the same job without them complaining. Now, some of you might be sitting here wondering, well, yeah, okay, maybe the jobs are being filled with foreign workers, but what's the issue? And while that's an understandable sentiment on its face, there's actually a fairly dark side to all of this. So it's pretty obvious why this is bad for people here. There aren't any goddamn jobs, and the ones that do exist have their wages artificially suppressed. However, this is a practice that is also grossly exploitative of those who are here on a work visa. If you offer a hiring manager for a big company a choice between an American willing to do a job for $120,000 a year and someone willing to do that job for $60,000 a year, of course they're going to go for the person that they can pay half as much. If someone is here on a work visa, they cannot leave that job. You have an employee who cannot quit and for whom firing also means deportation. So, what's downstream from this? Well, for one, a culture of widespread exploitation and overwork of these employees, with 60, 80, 90, even 100-hour work weeks being standard practice. This goes hand in hand with the next subject, the effect on housing. If you're working 100 hours a week, you're not going to be spending much time at home. In fact, considering that there are only 168 hours in a week, you're likely spending almost all of your time outside the office sleeping. Now, because of this somewhat atypical work-life balance, this leads to a lucrative rental practice: illegally converting apartments and houses to dormitory-style housing. If you only need a place to sleep and you're saving as much money as possible, it's a lot more appealing to pay $300 a month under the table and share a 3-bedroom house with 9 other guys. And for the landlord, what would have previously been a $1,500 a month rental to a family of 4 is now a $3,000 a month rental. But none of this is transparent. For the 4-person family here in places like Austin or Seattle or San Francisco, all they see is that it now costs twice as much to rent a house. And so that sounds like a pretty raw deal, right? Why do people want to come here just to live like that? Well, it's a similar mindset to how a lot of people approach joining the army. Like, okay, this is probably gonna suck, but I'm gonna do my 2 years, I'm gonna get out, get my GI Bill, etc. Remember, these aren't long-term positions. H-1B visas are only for 3 years with a potential extension to 6. So what happens is that people come here, work their ass off for 2 or 3 years, save every penny they can, and then return with a giant wad of cash. And because the differences in cost of living, 3 years' salary in an exceptionally expensive location in San Francisco that has high salaries, high wages, is worth considerably more elsewhere in the world. This, unfortunately, has an economic effect here, though, as a result. The supposed GDP boosts from hiring workers fail to materialize in reality due to the fact that all wages paid are getting saved instead of circulating throughout the economy. It's the exact same issue as why Reaganomics didn't actually work. Money doesn't help the economy if it's being hoarded. With this, though, it's even a step beyond that, because every dollar being paid is not only being saved instead of spent or invested, it's being removed from the country's economy entirely to circulate elsewhere. This revolving door, doing a tour mindset has also contributed to the negative perception of foreign tech workers here, and in particular those from India. This system has led to a major rise in anti-immigrant sentiment. Here's the issue, though. These people are not immigrants. The negative stereotypes of H-1B workers, i.e. clannishness and refusal to integrate, disrespect for the culture, absolute loyalty to India, etc., have been increasingly frequently applied to Indian immigrants and even Indian Americans. But here's the thing. Those stereotypes make a lot more sense for a group of people who are viewing being here through the lens of, I'm gonna work my ass off for 2 years for less money than my white coworkers so that I can go back to India and live like a king. Yeah, of course they're gonna be clannish and resentful and unwilling to integrate. But this is a very different thing than people from India who have legally immigrated and built a life here, oftentimes multiple generations ago, and frustration at this hiring practice should not extend to people who just happen to look similar. So, where do we go from here? Well, obviously, we need to keep up pressure on our elected officials to curtail this practice. However, one big thing that can be done, and actually the reason that I'm making this video, has been made available via a website called jobs.now. Bear with me, because this gets kind of complicated. So to my understanding, the system itself works basically like this. Companies have positions that they currently have filled with an H-1B worker. When a company wants to keep an H-1B employee, they file something called a perm, or Permanent Employment Certification. This is something that issues a green card to an H-1B employee to allow them to maintain their position indefinitely. Now, part of the criteria for being granted this certificate is for the employer to demonstrate that there is no qualified American applicant who can fill this position. The way that this is done is usually by listing the job as an opening that people can apply for. However, because the goal is to prevent Americans from applying, it works the exact same way as listing the H-1B jobs. Typically via a confusing ad on a local, very low circulation, ideally foreign language newspaper. Once the inevitable 0 qualified applicants for American citizens rolls in, they're free to proceed. What jobs.now does, however, is scrub the labor board filings for where these listings are publicly disclosed and collate them into the format of a regular job site. If any qualified American citizen applies to one of these jobs, it absolutely catastrophically fucks up the perm application. Now, there's actually an opening, because the right to overstay the visa is contingent upon there not being any Americans capable of filling the position. And because the perm applications are typically only filed at the end of the visa period, this generally results in the application's denial and the position opening for real. Now, here's the kicker. If once this position is open, you aren't hired despite being a qualified applicant, and they issue another H-1B visa despite having a qualified American applicant on file, this opens these companies up to a slam dunk lawsuit and them getting into an extraordinary amount of trouble. So, if you're an American college student graduating into the absolutely brutal tech job market, do your part and start applying. This is a practice that harms everyone here except for the owners of tech companies who want employees that they can work twice as hard for half as much money. And it is our responsibility as citizens to bring it to a halt. The only 2 reasons I can come up with to oppose jobs.now and what they're doing are crony capitalist greed and what is tantamount to treason. And I feel like both of those reasons are, bad. So let the great job hunt begin.
Right, I creep at night, posse